The Job Insanity Podcast with Erik 10 episode number
10.
Let the show begin.
Welcome to the first double-digit episode of the Job Insanity Podcast, the podcast where I'm interviewing people who have escaped the insanity of a job to create freedom of time and money in their lives. Today I'm speaking to Mike Stenhouse, the host of the Inside Property Investing Podcast, the leading property podcast in the UK with over 5,000 downloads per episode. Mike explains how he was able to break free from his corporate job early on with the support of his wife Victoria to build an income stream from property. Mike has a dream to travel the world for 12 months while still running his businesses, something I have done for 6 months at the end of 2016 with my family, and we will compare notes. Mike Stenhouse, podcast host, property investor, good at starting things, not so good at finishing them. But he has his wife Victoria covering him on this one. Welcome, Mike, to the show.
Hi, Erik. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. I had the honor of being interviewed on your Inside Property Investing podcast a while back, and I really enjoyed that. And since I'm now a bit further on with my podcast, I thought, let me ask you to come back on the show and hear your story. I'm looking forward to speaking to you today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's good to catch up. Obviously, we got the chance to catch up when you were over in Manchester. How long? That must have been over a month ago now. But yeah, great to see you in person. The podcast, it was great fun to do that and to hear about you. But I'm looking forward to being on the other side of the microphone for once now. I get to answer the questions for once rather than sit in your seat. So it'll be good for me as well.
Great. Okay, so let's maybe start off, Mike, with a little bit about your working life background. When did you start working? What did you do? And how did you end up now where you are a property investor, a podcast host, and you do trainings as well? So maybe those steps from where you started to where you are now, maybe you can tell me that story.
Sure. I'll try to give you the condensed version. So I grew up I was very fortunate, Erik. I had a pretty decent upbringing. Both parents were self-employed. I don't think I ever knew a time where either of them were working for someone else. And that kind of entrepreneurial atmosphere, although it had its stresses at times, and, I was kind of mildly aware of, financial ups and downs with cash flow problems at, in my kind of like adolescence. You do see those issues, and you see some of the stresses that come from running the business. But the freedom that I saw that my parents have, and I think freedom is probably going to be a theme throughout this, but, that had an impact on me from quite an early age. And it was something that I always had at the back of my mind, that whatever I do, I want to be in control of what that is, my schedule, how much money I can earn. I didn't really want other people to do it. But with parents who had struggled to put me through good schools and everything else, they had certain expectations for me. They wanted me to go to university. I got good grades in school, so that kind of pushed me down that path, and I ended up doing a law degree, which I hated every minute of. I dropped out of that as soon as I could, moved across to a business management degree, which, I enjoyed to an extent, more because I got to spend a year in Vancouver snowboarding more than studying, and, it was a great way to meet people and see the world. Again, it wasn't where my heart, my passion was. I was always trying to dabble in little side projects with, t-shirt printing businesses and driveway cleaning and all that sort of stuff growing up. And I kind of kept that going throughout university. But again, the kind of the expectations or the pressure, I suppose, from your peers and your parents and, your lecturers and all that sort of stuff made me look at graduate jobs. I didn't really have an idea of what business I wanted to start, so I thought, well, let's go and get some experience in the corporate world. So I got a graduate position with Procter & Gamble, obviously a big multinational company, in an IT project management type role. So didn't have much technical background, but it was a fairly generic position in what was, by all accounts, a great grad scheme. They really look after their people, and the money was good. So I was kind of early 20s, decent income, bought my own home and started to renovate that whilst I was working. And, just had a pretty nice life. The work schedule wasn't crazy. It was sort of 8:30 till 5 p.m. going out for a few drinks after work, good group of people to hang around with. And I actually thought, this corporate world's not so bad, getting a decent income. you leave your work kind of at the door. So got home and didn't really have much stress. And did that for a couple of years, but it kind of dawned on me that it was never going to get me where I wanted it to. I had ambitions bigger than that. And whilst I'd been probably a little bit complacent, enjoying the things that come when you start to earn a little bit of money in your youth with, nice meals out and holidays with your friends and all that sort of stuff, I realized that long term it wasn't going to give me the satisfaction that I kind of yearned for. So started to look at ways of engineering an escape route from the corporate world, and property had been something that I'd been passionate about, just as long as I'd wanted to start my own business. Really, property had been a possible option for me. My parents had dabbled with it a little bit. I grew up watching Homes Under the, or not, I guess not Homes Under the Hammer, that probably wasn't around at the time, but things like Sarah Beanie's Property Ladder and Grand Designs and all those sorts of TV shows.
Right.
Watching people renovate properties and rent them out, and just the numbers of it looked cool. I liked the kind of development side of things. I liked taking things that were ugly and making them nice again. So I dabbled with that a little bit whilst I was at university as well, and then met my now wife, and it transpired that her father had a letting agency, kind of real estate agency, that he'd been running for the best part of 10 years. And he was starting to think about his retirement at some point in the future, didn't really know what his exit route was going to be. So we started chatting. We both had an interest in property and business. And, I thought, being young and naive, that I could come in and expand this single branch agency into a national player. He could retire and go and sail his yacht around the world. I'd be making loads of money. And, we'd all live happily ever after. So I talked him around to letting me come and work for him for a year whilst we looked for a location to set up our second branch. I talked my parents into giving me their blessing to leave the corporate world, by which point I think they'd realized that it was going to happen at some point. So, just let me get on with it. And I talked my wife into supporting me and her being the breadwinner for the next 12 months or however long I thought it would take until the letting agency would start to generate enough income for me to take some of the profit from it, as well as her dad. So everyone was kind of aligned to this idea. And I left the corporate world. Was delighted the day that I left. It was kind of mixed emotions, but overwhelmingly happy about the decision that I was finally free. And I very quickly realized that trying to run a letting agency, you go from having one boss in the corporate world to having every tenant that you manage and every landlord that you manage thinking that they're your boss.
Right.
So I went from having one boss to like 200, and I was like, okay, no, this isn't what I signed up for. Everyone thinking that you were working for them, and I was ultimately. We were charging a fee for a service, and I was just providing that service to them. It was difficult. There were times where, trying to get customers on board, there was a whole bunch of learnings from that to try and understand how to run a business, how to scale a business, how to provide good customer service. That taught me a lot, but ultimately I realized that kind of service business wasn't what I was passionate about. And, again, Robert and I, Victoria's father, had a conversation about where we felt things were going after a couple of years. I had been using the letting agency as an excuse to start growing my own portfolio more aggressively, which I'd done a little bit in the corporate world, but I felt like being in the lettings industry, in the property industry full time, I could spend a bit more time growing my own portfolio. We started speaking at property networking events, which opened my eyes to a whole bunch of different investment strategies. So I was becoming more and more aware of the property industry and the potential profits that could be generated from that, but realized pretty quickly that trying to make my way as a letting agency wasn't what I wanted to do. So again, started to negotiate an exit from the lettings industry. And that kind of brings me up until what I'm doing now, which is still quite aggressively growing our portfolio, and also the podcast side of things, which evolved out of meeting people at these networking events and thinking, really simply, I was sitting there in a room of maybe 30 or 40 people listening to these guys talk who'd driven halfway across the country to spend an hour presenting and then maybe a bit of a sales pitch at the end. And I felt, having listened to podcasts a lot on my own, I was like, well, these guys could be having a conversation with me that is recorded from the comfort of their own home. And, if things go well, I could get that out to thousands of people instead of tens of people. It saves them time. It gives me a chance to chat to some of these people that are really inspiring me to do my own thing in the property world. And that just evolved out of that. Did a couple of interviews, much like probably how you started, just to test the water a little bit. We got some traction early on. And it just grew from there. So it allowed me to have a bit of a brand within the property industry, which has helped my own portfolio growth as well by introducing me to different contractors, different investors and joint venture partners, and a whole bunch of different positive benefits I didn't really expect at the time. But that's now where my time is split sort of 50-50 between the podcast side of things and my own property portfolio.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey, and there were some interesting coincidences, I think, in your past that, your father-in-law was actually in this business and you could get, into it by joining his business and seeing what's going on there. There was one thing that you mentioned, and that is the theme throughout this story, if I pick up one thing, is that you've had support from a lot of people around you. How important has that been in getting to where you are today? I mean, you mentioned your wife being the breadwinner. You were mentioning, your parents allowing you to at some point leave Procter & Gamble and go and try to start on your own. How important is it for you in your path to where you are now, and how important is it for you today?
I mean, it's hugely important, but maybe not for the reason that you would think. Without any sort of arrogance, I feel like I probably could have got where I am today without that support. And that wouldn't necessarily have been as easy. It wouldn't have been as pleasant. But the support from me was almost really, I felt like I owed it to certain people. I owed it to my parents to pursue what they wanted from me for a period of time, because they'd invested so heavily in me and my sister's education growing up, and they'd sacrificed a lot to put us in a position where we could go out and achieve certain things. I felt like my wife obviously my girlfriend at the time had met me at a position where we were both earning decent money, and we had discussed what our kind of 12-month and our 5-year plan looked like. And for me to leave the corporate world meant changing those things. With my father-in-law, he was looking for a retirement plan, and whilst I hoped that I could play a part in that, I also appreciated that there was a big element of risk on his part to take me on to invest the capital to open a second branch. I wasn't bringing any money really to the table there, so he was bankrolling most of it and taking a real chance on me. So I guess it was more almost like an obligation to live up to the expectations for these people, and I feel like I wouldn't have been as comfortable making those choices had they not been there to support me. And not all of them supported me all along. I said, my parents, they wanted me to go to university. They wanted me to get a corporate job. They knew at some point I'd start my own business, but they felt like I needed to go through the kind of process of kind of finishing my education and all that sort of stuff first. So it was more, I guess, waiting for them to be comfortable with the choice. And it was knowing that I had their support. That was a big thing for me. I didn't want to go off blindly and do it on my own. Like I mentioned, I probably still would have done it at some point, but it wouldn't have been as pleasurable an experience for me had I not had the buy-in from, each of these kind of stakeholders, I suppose, in the way that my life turned out.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. So currently, you've built your property portfolio. You're still very active in building that out. That was also what we spoke about when we met each other when I was in Manchester. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe how you got started in purchasing like your first property, and also how you came to the strategy of what you're doing now and sort of the size of what you're doing? Could you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So the first property I bought was just after my 18th birthday. It's about as early as you can get a mortgage in the UK. And I had been working part-time in like a supermarket, a grocery store, stacking shelves in the produce department. So, 6 a.m. every morning, putting apples and bananas out on the shelves. And it was that was an eye-opener for me, but a whole different story. But I, through that, had managed to save up, I don't know, maybe about £5,000 at the time, which, 17, 18 years old, about to go off to university. I thought I was doing pretty well from that. I think I'd maybe made a little bit of that from, I mentioned that I had a job cleaning driveways as well. So a few bits and pieces gave me some kind of small amount of cash in the bank. And at the time, I was living in a town where I'd grown up in the kind of east coast of Scotland. Property prices were pretty low there. I was eligible for a 95% mortgage, so I only needed a 5% deposit. And I thought, well, if I'm about to go off to university, why not buy something that is sitting, renting out, giving me a bit of an income every month, and hopefully there's a little bit of appreciation there over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. So I bought a flat, an apartment. It was just a 1-bedroom apartment in a kind of really ugly ex-council tower block for about £60,000. So with that 95% deposit, I think I needed 95% mortgage, I needed about £3,000. So a really cheap way to get into it. And over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, I maybe cleared £100 a month, which gave me some beer money. And as a student, I thought, this is great. Mm-hmm. Graduated, moved down to Newcastle, which is northeast of England. And part of their graduate recruitment policy was that if you had to sell your own home to move there, they would pay all of your legal fees, your buying fees, your selling fees, and all that sort of stuff. And I don't think they'd ever actually had to implement this before, because obviously you can imagine most people graduating from university have been in student halls or rented accommodation. Yes. But thankfully, because I bought this property 3 years ago, although it wasn't my own home, I still fit the criteria to qualify for all of these legal costs and everything from P&G. So that must have saved me a good few £1,000s. And I thought, well, now's a great time to sell. Sold that, bought my own place in Newcastle, and that was a wreck. It had been lived in by an old lady, needed fully renovated, and I lived there whilst I was doing the work, which was, such an eye-opener, such a learning experience for me, but something that I vowed I would never do again, is to live in a project. It is no fun at all. But I did that. I rented out 2 of the space. So it was a 3-bedroom apartment. I rented out 2 of the guest bedrooms to 2 of my friends from work. And I realized that, all my bills were paid and all my mortgage was paid. So I was living in my own home that was fully renovated to a great standard, and it wasn't costing me a penny. So I liked that. I then met Victoria. We decided after about 6 months or so that we wanted to move in together, and the apartment underneath mine came on the market around about the same sort of time. So bought that. Again, it needed renovated. So did that, moved in there with Victoria, rented out the 3rd bedroom in the one that I had been living in, so my old bedroom, and that paid the mortgage on the property downstairs as well. So I then had 2 houses, both of which were renovated and neither of which were costing me a penny. The mortgages were getting paid down. They were on repayment mortgages, and other people were paying for all of this for me. And I thought, there's definitely something here. Over the next couple of years with Victoria, we flipped a small number of properties, probably in the kind of single figures over, 4 years or so. Just buying tired properties, renovating them, new kitchen, new bathroom, a lick of paint, new carpets, and selling them on and making maybe £15,000, £20,000 at a time. And that was great to have 2 corporate incomes and these chunks of cash coming in every 6 months. We thought we had kind of made it. We were going on nice holidays. We'd make 15 grand and we'd spend 8 of it doing a road trip around California, something like that. So making stupid decisions as young people, but not really regretting it because we had this great setup. And I guess it was that trial period of having the comfort of the corporate job and still getting into property investment in a relatively kind of low cost way. We were putting things on credit cards for some of the renovation costs and taking out loans to pay for the deposits on, 0% credit cards, 2% interest a year loans. It was a really cheap way for us to try this out, and for me just to kind of find my feet a little bit with what I was doing with regards to renovating houses and renting them out and all that sort of stuff. So that really set the seed for me. And then I said, I left the corporate world, went to the letting agency, sold most of what we had in Newcastle because we wanted to start investing in the Northwest in Manchester, where we now live, and then started to get a bit more creative. So we understood what an HMO was then, so we started to buy HMOs. We understood the process for flipping houses, so we kind of stepped it up a gear and started to do slightly higher value flips, and really just grew it from there. Things have evolved.
Maybe for the listeners, an HMO is a technical term in the UK. It basically stands for a building where you have separate rooms let out to individual tenants with or without their own bathroom. Yeah, so it's basically a big building with sort of studios inside them.
Yeah, exactly. So it's shared living. They have kind of shared communal space. They have their own bedrooms. Quite common among students across the world, but for young professionals, it seems to be quite niche for the UK. But we focused specifically on young professionals. We didn't want to go into the student market. As young professionals, we kind of felt like we knew what other tenants would like. I'd lived in a couple of HMOs whilst moving back and forwards between Manchester and Newcastle, so I knew what the market was like.
Yes.
And yeah, we saw that as a way to give us more of a steady stream of income on a monthly basis rather than the flips, which were giving us chunks of cash every 6 or 9 months.
Yeah.
We wanted to start building up this. I'm really reluctant to use the word passive income, but as a generic term, you know what I mean. It was recurring, steady income rather than big chunks of cash. So that appealed to us. We started buying up a couple of HMOs. We started then seeing the value of converting commercial buildings into residential, again, in our case, mainly HMOs, just because the purchase prices of commercial property was cheap comparative to residential. So you could buy the same square foot of commercial property significantly cheaper than you could residential. And the renovation costs would be slightly higher, but not enough to balance out that discount in price. So we were still getting a great buy on the commercial stuff. And now we're at the stage where, we've got a number of these HMOs up and running. We've got a couple of projects in flights with regard to HMOs, but we're also now looking at what we do in the future. So we've got a plot of land secured that we're going to start building out 5 apartments and a commercial unit on. And we're starting just to kind of diversify a little bit and go back to doing some flips, maybe try to retain some single lets. Now that we're at the cash flow that we want to be, we feel like it's time to start diversifying our portfolio again and just kind of taking down that risk level a little bit, because as much as I like HMOs from an income point of view, there are some murmurs about the market changing and competition increasing and all that sort of stuff. So just for us, now that we're at a stage where we're reasonably comfortable with our income level, we want to start looking longer term and just give us an income that we feel is a bit more secure as well.
Right. The kinds of numbers that you were mentioning when you just started, right? When the times when you could borrow 95% of a property's price, at least in the UK, some of these terms have changed quite dramatically. Would you say that has made the business of property more difficult to operate, or are you not of that opinion?
I mean, I honestly think we maybe perhaps bent a few rules, and obviously, Eric, this is just between me and you. I'd appreciate if you don't tell anyone else, right? That was a terrible joke about a podcast, but never mind.
I think it would be hard to contain, I'm afraid.
So I'm fairly open about this. We perhaps were in a bit of a grey area at times with our early investments. So I bought my first property with a 95% kind of owner-occupier mortgage, and then immediately applied for consent to rent it out.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, mortgage companies in the UK will quite often, if your circumstances change and you don't want to sell your house, they'll let you rent your property out for a period of time. So, whether I knew at the time that I was going to rent it out or not, who knows, but they gave me consent to let on it pretty much straight away. So they knew what I was doing. I wasn't necessarily breaking any rules, but I maybe didn't follow the process to the letter. I maybe should have had a 30% deposit down on that as a buy-to-let property, but I asked their permission. They gave it. That was fine.
Yes. On
the residential stuff, we bought it in our personal names to start with on the flips. Yeah. Initially, that was because the first one, I fully intended on living there. Then the second one I bought was Victoria. Again, I got consent to let on the previous one, and I got that in my own personal name. The first flip that we did with Victoria was in her personal name because she wanted to get on the property ladder. We hadn't decided, our relationship might have broken or whatever reason that might have been. She would have been more comfortable if she had a property in her own name. So we bought that in her personal name. And then it just so happened that she moved in with me and we decided to sell that one on. So the first couple, we took advantage of personal mortgages. Even now though, some of the best deals that we have done have been our own home. We've bought a home, the house that I'm sitting in just now recording this, we bought about 2.5 years ago. We spent the first 3 or 4 months renovating that. We bought it for $320. We probably spent about $80,000 on it. So, all in for about 400, and it's probably now worth about 500,000. So there's 100 grand's worth of created equity in that. And because it's our own property, we've got a relatively low deposit in it. And at the time that we choose to sell it, there's no capital gains tax to pay. In the UK, you don't pay capital gains tax on your own home. So, I think there are still ways that you can make property investing work, particularly when you're just getting started out, by using some of the incentives that are there for homeowners. If you are happy to be a bit transient, you can renovate your own house every 12 months, every 18 months and pay no tax on that gain. So there are still ways to do what I did with low deposits, with minimizing your tax liability. And if I lost everything, I'd probably start exactly the same way today. I think it's still entirely feasible. And once you start to generate a bit of profit from your own home, you can then start investing that into other rental properties, which, yes, you'll need to put down a higher deposit, and yes, you'll need to pay tax on them. But I think you can absolutely get started taking advantage of, like I say, some of the incentives that exist for homeowners.
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a great way to look at it. And I think this leads me nicely into the other part of your life where you're actually making a large effort to get all this kind of information from yourself and from others out to the world. You're hosting a podcast that is very popular in the UK, the Inside Property Investing podcast. And I would like to ask you, how does that fit in with this business? And mainly, what does it actually do for you doing that podcast?
So I started the podcast because I was, for a while, probably about 6 months, maybe as much as 12 months, I was driving for probably about 3 hours every Monday morning and every Friday evening back and forwards between Newcastle and Manchester. And I got fed up listening to the same songs on the radio, so I switched across to podcasts and very quickly realized that there was a lot out there on, small business, startups, entrepreneurship, marketing, and really got into listening to personal development type stuff on this 3-hour commute that I did twice a week, and just found it such a great way to consume content that you could do whilst you're doing another task, like driving, like going to the gym. It was a great way for me to sit and make good, valuable use of that time that otherwise would have been redundant and written off every week. So I started listening to podcasts, and then I mentioned earlier about when I started going to the property networking events and kind of joined the dots between, well, why don't we look at recreating some of my favorite podcasts with UK-based property investors. And I'll be honest, when I started off the podcast, the property investment had always been a sideline for me up until that point, and I fully intended for it to continue to be a sideline. It's actually now quite a lucrative sideline in terms of financial benefit, but when I started the podcast, I really intended for that element of it to be my core business focus, and the property would be a kind of sideline, a residual investment. And I still look at it that way. A lot of people feel, particularly in the UK, and Erik, you'll know this from a lot of the forums and some of the Facebook groups, that there's a bit of negativity towards people who are described by others as gurus, or kind of like the whole personal development arena in the property industry in the UK. There's quite a lot of negative press about that people started investing in property and they couldn't make it work, so they decided to sell courses instead. I kind of started off the opposite way. I wanted to create a media company that happened to be based around a podcast and happened to be based around the property industry. And I had these plans that are only now starting to come to fruition, with video content, with blog articles written by guest authors and all sorts of stuff. I had this whole web of how this Inside Property Investing brand was going to develop long before the property investment itself gave me enough income to not really need to work again. But I mean, it's opened so many doors to me that I didn't think would be possible. I knew at the time that in order for it to provide an income, I'd need to get up to a certain audience size. And we're at the stage now where the audience allows us to generate an income from things like sponsorship on the show, and a couple of courses that we offer.
Yes.
But predominantly, the big benefits have been the awareness that it has given for us within the property industry. So we now get calls on a weekly basis from people that are looking to invest with us. They want us to take their money and put it into some of our deals and give them a return on it, or do an equity split where they'll maybe have 30% or 50% of the deal. We'll put in the knowledge and the time. They put in the funds, and we split the returns in a kind of roughly even way. So that's been a massive benefit for us. It's allowed us to grow our portfolio quicker than we could have done. And it's also just allowed me to meet and speak to a lot of really interesting and really inspiring individuals that I probably wouldn't have had the chance to speak to otherwise. I was invited out to Dubai a couple of months ago and got to spend a couple of days with a great group of property investors that gave me a different perspective on the UK property market from that external expat point of view. I also get a chance to give, I've got a Skype address book here full of some of the top property investors in the UK. And had I not had the podcast, had I not had a platform for them to get some value from, I wouldn't be able to call them up now and get advice from them when I need it. So some of the top developers down in London, some of the top property tax accountants, if I've ever got a question, because I've given them value, they're more than happy to spend some time helping me out. And that, I guess, kind of, I don't know what you call it, that resource share or something, that type of value split, because I've given them something of value, they're now more than happy to help me. And without that knowledge and that support network that is created for me, I don't think I'd be where I am today with the property investment side of things. So there's been a whole bunch of secondary benefits that almost outweigh the financial gain that we get from it now as well.
Yeah, I can understand that. And is it sort of also an always accelerating kind of vehicle? I mean, if once you get some maybe bigger name guests on your show, then other people that are of that same kind of caliber are willing to come on and speak to you. Is that also how it works?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I don't know if you find this, but the whole podcast growth model, particularly with podcasts podcasting is a massive industry and it is growing rapidly, but a lot of that is kind of real niche hobbies and passions, and people are turning on the microphone and talking about something because they care about it, and for them it is a hobby and there's no desire to make it an income, to make it a job for themselves. But for those people who start podcasts with this belief that it can become an income for them, that it can become a business, the growth model for them tends to follow similar patterns. So the idea is you get one person on your show and you ask them to send it out to the people that they know. The second person comes on the show and does the same, but as well as them sending it out to the people they know, they get the benefit of the first person who sent it out to their audience. So they've then got two audiences that are listening to their show. So by the time you're at the stage we are, where we've done about 200 episodes, if each of those 200 people sends it to even 10 or 20 people, the audience just grows exponentially with each new interview that you release. And it's been a fantastic model for us that has worked extremely well. And also, like you say, the caliber of guests starts to grow as well. As you start to get traction, you've got a platform. When I started out, I had a couple of contacts that I knew in the property industry, and I had to kind of persuade them to come onto it. I'm like, look, I hope this is going to be downloaded by a couple of hundred people. You're currently driving for 2 hours to talk to 30 people. So, take a chance on me, get behind a microphone in your home office whenever you've got a chance, and, it might work out for you. It might not, but for 30 minutes of your time, for 60 minutes of your time, there's not a lot to lose. We're now at the stage where we're getting, around about 5,000 downloads per episode, which for me is still not where I want it to be, but compared to, some podcasts in their early days, it's a great audience now. And compared to some other platforms in the property industry, for these people to reach such a wide audience, it could cost them hundreds of pounds to speak at an event, thousands of pounds to get an article published in a magazine. So for me to say to them, look, you can get access to 5,000 people, doesn't cost you a penny, it just takes an hour of your time, and you can do it from anywhere in the world. We've had people calling in from all over the world, like yourself, Erik, from Jakarta. Right. We had our mortgage broker on a couple of days ago, and he was sat in the airport on his way home from the Monaco Grand Prix. He had half an hour free. We'd been trying to get a time to schedule it. And he said, look, I'll call you from the airport. So for them, it's a really low touch way. It's very easy for them to get on the show and, to get exposure to that audience. It's a really appealing value proposition for them now. So the dynamic has completely changed, and it is now more a case of people coming to us saying, look, we'd love to come on the show. How can we add value for your audience, compared to when I started out and I had to really be selling it to them?
Yeah, I understand. Just recently, you had a very joyful event. Your wife joined your business, and she left her while the fireworks are going off in Jakarta. Your wife joined your business and left her job, and is now working with you. Yeah. Tell me how special that moment was, and how the business now with the two of you works together.
No, I mean, it was fantastic. So I think I mentioned earlier that when we first got together, we had a kind of 12-month plan and a 5-year plan. And that's something that we always talk about, where we want to be 12 months from now, where we want to be in a few years down the line, just so that we've always got a direction of where we want to end up. And one of the goals that we wanted to hit before our 30th birthday, which is in September this year, was that we wanted Victoria to leave the corporate world as well. She had been, like I say, the breadwinner for a number of years between me leaving the corporate world and finally, only fairly recently, getting to the stage where I was earning enough for both of us to not need to work for anyone else anymore. So it got to Christmas this year. I think we were up in Scotland and just having a chat about what we wanted to do. And we came to the realization, having looked at the accounts and the financials and everything, that we were in a position now where she could leave work. So she made the decision to bring forward her exit by about 9 months, and she went back after Christmas, fully intent on handing in her notice. I think she had 3 months notice to work at Kellogg's. And it was such a relief for her, I think, to not have the idea of that commute to and from work every day. She enjoyed her job. She enjoyed working with the people that, she was in the office with. But ultimately, I think she saw the freedom that I had. And although I probably work in terms of hours twice as long as she did in the corporate world, I've always got my laptop open or my phone on me. I could have done that from anywhere. So when we were on holiday, there was never any last minute, I need to get this finished before I go, because I had, an 8-hour flight. I'd happily sit on my laptop at the pool, and I felt like I could continue to do what I was doing from wherever. She had that location that she needed to be in. She had a boss that she was accountable to, and that ability for her to say to them, look, we've created something on our own that means we no longer need to do this. Appreciate everything you've done for us over the past couple of years, but it's time for me to go and work for myself. I think that was a massive relief for her, a massive weight off her shoulders, and really just the first step in the rest of our lives, because our plans can get crazy now that we've got two of us working on it. We've had to be quite conservative over the past couple of years to focus really on specific things that will give us sufficient income that she can leave. Now we've got that income, now that she has left, we can really kind of say, well, what do we want to do? What do we want to build? What do we want to create over, 10 years, over 15, over 20 years, rather than just thinking, okay, we need to get X number of pounds every month in the next 6 months so that you can leave your job. So it gives us a whole new host of opportunities that we're both extremely excited about. And she's really just finding her feet now, trying to understand and untangle this mess that I've created over the past few years with, the projects that I've been starting and working on. I'm very much a creator, so I love starting projects, Erik, but I couldn't tell you the last time I ever finished one. She is very much a details person, so we actually complement each other quite well.
Yes.
So she's coming in and saying, okay, Mike, from an income point of view, you're doing well, but what the hell have you created? This just makes no sense. So she's kind of trying to untangle that, put the systems in place, put all that kind of due diligence and, all the stuff that she really is passionate about in place. And I think me having that sounding board as well now, it just feels like everything makes a lot more sense now. So we're both, just so happy that we're in this position, and fortunate as well. It's not something that a lot of people have the opportunity to do, to spend 7 days a week with your wife or your husband. A lot of people would say, Christ, I don't even want to spend 2 hours with my husband or my wife, never mind 7 days a week. But, for us, we're extremely lucky, I feel. And yeah, I'm just excited about the opportunities that having that, that extra head alongside me is going to give us in the future.
It probably also has a lot to do with the fact that from your story, you have been very clear to each other about where you want to go in life and what you want to do with this property path that you're on. So maybe from early on, the both of you were already quite aligned on what you wanted to do in life. Is that maybe why it works out so well?
Yeah, 100%. Because we both have that shared vision and we're both working towards the same thing, I think that it's very easy for us to have those conversations, and, difficult things arise. As in any circumstance in life, there will be issues and there will be problems. But I guess because we have this shared vision, it's very easy to know what the solution is, what the right steps are to move towards that. Because if you have this guiding light, the direction you want to be going in. It's not so much a decision that you need to make on a constant basis. It's more a question of, okay, if this is our single kind of overriding goal, and this is the problem that we're facing, what solution to that problem is best going to keep us in the right direction? Having that kind of shared set of goals and that shared belief system, it helps hugely.
Okay. So since you've now brought the turbocharger on the business in the person of Victoria, how are you going to grow this business for the next 5 years? What kind of picture do you have in your mind for where this is going to go in 5 years' time?
So I'll talk about the two elements of it separately. From the property investment perspective, that is really going to be the branch that Victoria takes responsibility for. So managing the in-flight projects that we have got, will both still be involved in the investor relations and the deal sourcing side of things. I like going out and finding unloved properties and trying to get a little bit creative about how we can best use the space, and I want to remain involved in that. But the actual delivery of the development projects, the renovation projects, the new builds, that is what Victoria is going to take responsibility for, and her kind of project management, analytical, OCD side is just perfectly suited to that. Like I say, love starting projects, but for me, when I should be spending time trying to finish a project that we're currently working on, instead I'm sitting on Rightmove trying to find the next one to buy. So she's very much a finisher and will help us complete these projects in a quicker time frame and start getting income in from them quicker. So that's really going to be her focus. And on the future of that, we're starting to move away from acquiring HMOs, and we are looking more at development sites. We're looking more at building spaces, whether that is from the ground up or by converting more commercial properties into residential, but creating single family homes, single units. There's a massive housing shortage in the UK, and we feel like by either converting commercial space or doing new build developments, we can still create really impressive financial returns from less creative strategies. So rather than going down the shared house route, we can still create great financial returns from single lets because we're adding value through the build stage. So we're going to be looking more at that side of things. This plot of land that we've secured is hopefully the first of many projects that fit that bill. So we bought a plot of land that has got planning permission in place, and we're going to build 5 apartments there. We may sell 1 or 2 of them, but we'll have an extremely low mortgage on the rest of them. We'll still get a very good income from them because the build cost is quite low, and it adds to that monthly income. There should be good capital appreciation in the area that we've bought, and if we can keep adding to it, maybe 5 or 10 units every year, we'll be in a pretty comfortable position for the foreseeable future. So that's going to be Victoria's focus. My side, now that I can hopefully kind of push some of these projects across the desk to Victoria, my focus is going to come back to the podcast and really building that media company that I wanted to. I see Inside Property Investing becoming almost like a Mashable or a TechCrunch for the property world. So rather than it just being a podcast where I interview property investors, there will be audio, video and written content on everything to do with the property industry. I'm not entirely sure if that's just going to have a UK focus or if it's going to have a more global audience as we continue to grow that. But we will have things from interior design to financial planning to the interviews that started the whole thing off. But I'm just playing around with different formats, different content types, different guest contributors. And, it's great that we don't need to be thinking constantly about how can we monetize this because we've got income from elsewhere. So I can try things like this. We can go and spend a day videoing, someone's property life and see if that works, and just try new things, see what resonates, but really create certainly a national, if not a global brand for property investors, that Inside Property Investing is the place to go for property news, property knowledge, property inspiration.
That's a great vision you have, and I think the way you're going, there's a good chance that you're going to get there. I think so. That's wonderful.
And you know what? Even if we don't, it's still going to be an enjoyable experience. So, Erik, I don't start down this path thinking I'm going to fail. But for me, the process of building something is as much fun as the end result. And, as I said, when we were talking about the benefits of the podcast, it's not just financial. It's the relationships that has created for me. It's the other opportunities that has brought about in the property world. So, there are whether it's financially successful, the ongoing benefits that we get from creating content that helps other people achieve their own sort of financial freedom, I think that's going to have long-term benefits for us that we don't even know what they're going to look like yet, as we didn't when we started the podcast, but I'm sure they will come for us. So yeah, whether it's a big financial success or not, I'm not sure, but it just feels like the right thing to do. I'm passionate about it. I know there's an audience there for it. And, like I say, if I don't need to worry too much about the financial side of things, then whatever the result is, I'm sure it'll be positive in some way.
I'm sure it will be. How has all these activities that you've done, you've worked up to the point now where, you have a steady income stream, you have lots of interesting projects on the go, you're going into development whereby in the future maybe even larger amounts of cash can come your way. Mm-hmm. Has something changed, especially since Victoria left her job, has something changed in the way that you and maybe the both of you are conscious about where you're spending your time and how you're designing your life? Is that a topic that you're thinking about a lot?
It is, yeah, on kind of two separate levels. So on a kind of micro day by day basis, absolutely. I've just finished listening to a book called Deep Work, which is really all about spending less focused time and getting more done in less time by being super focused on what you're doing. And prior to this, I was very kind of scattergun. Like, I'd have my email open on the screen all day, my phone would be next to me all day, and I'd never get any real valuable work done because I'd constantly just be firefighting. If an email came in, I felt like I needed to answer it. If the phone rang, I needed to answer that. What I'm now trying to do is to spend a couple of hours every day without any distractions on real focused work, helping to build this kind of media side of the company. And I still then have a couple of hours to answer the emails, to call contractors and all that sort of stuff. But I also then switch my laptop off in the evenings, or I'm trying to switch my laptop off in the evenings and spend quality time with my wife as well. So my days kind of split up a bit better now. I'm a lot more conscious of how I'm spending the hours in my day, and I try to plan them out either the evening before or the morning of. What am I going to do between kind of 7 and 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. What am I going to do kind of in that kind of afternoon slot where most people want to get hold of me, and then what are we going to do in our evening? So actually planning out our leisure time as well, rather than just sitting in front of the TV and watching whatever comes on. And I only finished listening to this book a couple of weeks ago, but that process of being more methodical with how I spend my time seems to be helping hugely in terms of allowing me to create more valuable work than I was able to before in the same amount of time, which is great. So on a kind of micro level, little tweaks like that, I'm always trying to improve my own personal productivity. But in terms of how we spend our time into the future, and I'm not sure if this was kind of what you were alluding to or not, but for me, freedom for us is less about the finances. Obviously, it's important to have enough money to be secure or independent. But for me, it's about having kind of freedom of choice, freedom of location. And again, with the inside property investing media side of things, it would be great to have that alongside the property portfolio, because we can step away from the property portfolio, bring someone else in to manage that, but I can still be running the media side of the business from anywhere in the world. We've got a plan within the next couple of years to go away for 12 months, and that will probably look something like 3 or 4 months in a ski resort, then 3 or 4 months traveling around Europe, and then maybe 3 or 4 months traveling around the US or Asia or somewhere like that. So, it's a high level plan at the moment, but we've got a passion to travel, and we want to test this theory about being able to work remotely, be able to work from anywhere. Plenty of people do it. The whole kind of digital nomad lifestyle is extremely popular at the moment. And I feel like the inside property investing media side of the company can continue to be run from anywhere in the world. So that's what I'm starting to think about now. At what point do we stop taking on new development projects for a period of time so that we can wind up what we're working on now and have sufficient resources coming in from both the property portfolio and the media company that we can afford to travel and continue to earn an income whilst we're traveling wherever, it decides to take us. And seeing people like yourself living in Jakarta, being able to record podcasts with people all over the world, it goes to show that it's entirely feasible. So that's something that we're just starting to talk about now and think, where do we want to go? When do we want to go there? And, what balance do we want to have between working and, I guess, leisure time?
I think it's a very good goal and an exciting plan. I took my family for 6 months traveling last year in the US, and I think it was one of the most impactful experiences I've had in my whole life.
And did you, how did that work with the children? Did you homeschool them? Are they not at school yet, or?
Yeah, all of them are at school. They're 13 and below. Okay. So we basically went to the school, took them out of school and prepared a homeschooling plan. This was between, July till December last year. So we had only 4 months of school, but we prepared it and we brought it with us. But I think what we've learned from that is that we did the best we could in homeschooling them. But them coming back into school, it only takes a month or two before whatever, setback they had in their learning is compensated again by them being back into school. So it was actually quite easy for them to roll back into school. And,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that ability to, travel with you guys for 6 months and the experiences that they must have had, and that must have opened their eyes to a whole different world. It must have given them a completely different perspective on cultures, on, just different ways of living that you're never going to learn in school. And like you say, you can catch up with a math textbook with some extra kind of help, a couple hours a week within a month. But the kids that they've gone back into school with don't have that experience. So they're going to be far better rounded. And yeah, they may have a month of catching up to do, but the actual life experience and the life skills that they'll get from that will surely be far more valuable than what they could have learned in those 6 months in school.
Yeah, and maybe reflecting back on your ideas and your situation, I think when you make the step, like in your dream to go away for a year, it will show you that actually it is very, very feasible to run a business, a life, a lifestyle while you're not in one location. There might be some damage. There might be some things going wrong. There might be some things not going as you expect them to go. But that's also a learning. For me also, it was a big lesson in letting go and a big lesson in reflecting on what was really important in my working life and in my business life as well. So I hope you do it. I hope you do it quickly so that, you get this experience, the way we had it, the last year. I want to ask you, if people are inspired by your story and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to contact you?
So the website is probably going to be the easiest place. It's got links to all of our social media channels and everything. So the website is just insidepropertyinvesting.com. But, social media we are more active on, particularly now with Victoria as well. So I guess for us, a lot of our content is across Instagram and Facebook. So Facebook, it's just Inside Property Investing, as it is on Instagram, but equally searching for our personal profiles, Mike Stenhouse and Victoria Stenhouse. We're posting stuff on there as well about the IPI brand, I guess, is really the property side of things, obviously. But we're both passionate about business generally on our own personal pages as well. And always happy to connect with people. My email is just mike@insidepropertyinvesting.com. And, Erik, as I'm sure you do, I get an abundance of emails, but it's always great to hear from people and just have a chat with people, get their perspectives. I mentioned that was the whole reason one of the major benefits I got from the podcast anyway, was chatting to these people. So as much as it can be time consuming to converse with so many people, when you get a bit of a brand about yourself, it is, some of those connections will lead to great things in the future. So it's always worth, I feel, taking a little bit of time just to have a chat with someone. So yeah, email's a great way to get in touch with me as well. But yeah, probably just, like I say, our website, social media, and YouTube as well. If you want to see what I look like, we've started doing a few more videos now as well, which is another little passion of ours. So you can see what we've been up to as well as hearing us talk about it on the podcast.
That's great. I hope many, many people go and find you and go and connect with you. For me personally, Mike, I want to acknowledge you for really being, I think, a driving force in the UK of selflessly providing content for many people that want to get into the property business in the UK. And I think that's a great mission. And personally, I really want to thank you for getting me into podcasting. My first podcast experience was being a guest on your show. And that really triggered the thought of, hey, this is something that I want to do. In my 6 months travel, I decided that I needed to get out a bit more of the artist in me. And I thought this is actually the way I want to do it. So you were the trigger for this. So I want to thank you and acknowledge you for that. I wish you all the best in establishing your global brand with Inside Property Investing. And I hope to hear a lot about you in the future.
Well, thank you so much for that, Erik. I'm obviously delighted to hear that I've played a part in your own journey as well. And I'm sure that, it's going to be a relationship that continues as many of them have that have come on the back of the podcast. And I'm sure it's going to be great for you as well to meet a whole bunch of new people. So, you just mentioned something there, and I know you want to wrap us up here, but about bringing out that artist in you. I think it's something that we all have in us, but we kind of get beaten out of us as we kind of go through adolescence a little bit. And it's creating something that you think will create value for other people. It's just opened so many doors for me, as it is doing for you now as well. So yeah, I'd encourage anyone to kind of follow that advice that you gave there and just go out and whatever it is you're passionate about, whether it's photography, whether it's about interviewing people, creating videos, it's just a great way of sharing what you love doing and of meeting new people. And yeah, I'd really strongly encourage anyone to get out there and, just try doing things, see what works for you. And, the benefits that you will get from helping other people are just, they so far outweigh any time or effort it'll take you to create that content. And it's well worth everyone doing, I think.
Absolutely. Mike Stenhouse, thank you so much for the interview. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, Erik. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Job Insanity Podcast. Please visit jobinsanity.com for more information and show notes.